Hello, today we're going to be reblading a blue weapon using a Gorg-Tech reblade kit. We're going to be using a .524 kite spar, and we're going to be using the kit for that core. The kit is the 2-pound Fodere striking foam, the 4-pound routed base foam, and then we're going to have the Insulite stabby tip. We're going to be using DAP, but use the original formula and not the gel formula. At least that's what I recommend. We're going to be using some strapping tape. You can actually see the fibers in the tape. That's that kind of strapping tape. Good razor knife and plenty of extra blades to have around. Those are always good to have. A bit of sandpaper. Got some on a sanding block here. I use a fine tooth saw. This is a little hacksaw I use. Some hockey tape. This is Howie's hockey tape. Some kind of marker, Sharpie. Some duct tape. Gonna need that for the flats. And I like to have a template around just for checking. So we start by, of course, removing the old sword cover. Basically just stripping down the sword, getting it ready. Going to be removing the, the duct tape and the strapping tape and the foam. Some of the other materials you might need, I keep a bench of ice around. Maybe some brushes for the DAP. I use pieces of blue foam actually, but brushes are nice too. So once you've got all the tape off, I usually just use the razor knife, cut down the center of the old foam and just basically start ripping it apart, ripping it off. Once you get the core off, you're going to be making sure to remove as much of the old foam as possible. I pretty much make sure it's all gone. But yeah, you can see this just you just basically grab and pull. Pretty soon we'll get down to the safety tip here of the core, and I'll pretty much always replace the safety tip, which is just the round end piece biscuit of 4-pound foam on the end. You can see this was previously put on with strapping tape, which we're going to be doing. Well, in this case, you'll see it looks like the foam was actually pushed inside of the core itself, since kite spar is hollow. As soon as I get to that part of the video. Yeah, patience. You don't want to cut into the core, but you can see the little button of foam has been pushed inside. So it probably wasn't big enough, and it's also the wrong kind of foam. It really should be 4-pound foam, especially for the hollow ones, because you can see it just got pushed inside and is basically doing nothing. So get all that tape off, get the foam off as much as you can with your hands, and then I take a razor knife and just start pushing the foam off. You be careful not to cut into the actual core itself. You're just kind of pushing it off, kind of scraping it. Just take your time, put on some good music, just slowly move that foam off. You want to get it, to me, you want to get it cleaned off as much as possible, just to make sure the new foam is going to adhere properly. There's not going to be any issues. So you get the main bit off, then you kind of go back and do some more fine scraping. Again, you're keeping the angle so you're not digging into the core. And then finish off with some sandpaper to get rid of the last bits of foam, and making sure that the core itself is roughed up a bit. It's always better to have it rougher for adhesion with the DAP. DAP, from what I understand, being a contact cement, it's supposed to be able to handle smooth surfaces, but to me, it's better just to prepare it even more so, So yeah, just sand this down until all the old foam and glue is off, and it's a little bit rough. You can see by the whiteness of the core that it's it's down a little bit to the fiberglass itself. Next, we're going to be creating the safety tip. So we're going to create like a button of 4-pound foam. I just have some 1/2-inch puzzle mat here. I just use the core itself as like a template for the the circle of foam. So just place it on the foam and mark it around with a Sharpie, and just cut until it is the right size. So yeah, you can see I've got my circle, and I'm just cutting straight down. You want to make sure not to taper the cuts. You want the sides to be even and not tapered in. You want it to be like one solid piece. So yeah, do a couple tests. Put it up to the core, and you don't want it too big, because this is where the routed core foam is going to be folding back over the top, and you don't want it too big and so it'll be all bulgy. It's also one of the more trickier areas for the foam to adhere to itself, is right at that tip part. So it's a balance between getting the biscuit the right size, so it provides the safety that we want without being so big that it's bulky, and the sword build doesn't adhere correctly. So again, take your time, play with this until you get the right size. And then, since this is hollow and having that other foam bit from the other build push inside, I didn't like that, so I'm going to do a little extra protection here and cut basically a disc of leather. So we'll put the leather between the core and the biscuit, just to give it a little more stability and keep the biscuit from being pushed inside the core itself. And again, same thing, you're shaping the little piece there to be as small as possible, but still do its job as far as blocking off the end. So just do little snips and do many tests, comparing the size to the biscuit and to the core. Once you're good, then you can kind of stack them on there and see that they look pretty good to go. Then you're going to take some strapping tape. This is probably like 3 inches strapping tape, and then I split it in half. It splits pretty easy. Put over top of the biscuit, put your foam down on top of the leather, on top of the core, and then pull down to compress it to like 1/8 of an inch or so, 1/4 of an inch. And the strapping tape is very strong. It should hold it on there no problem. Then you take the other half of the piece of tape and do it perpendicular to the first half. Again, compressing it down. it's a pretty good amount of force there. Press it on, make sure it's good to go, and then we're going to take one more piece of tape and wrap it around the tip just for a little bit more stability. Oops. And again, don't wind it around too much. You want it to go around once, because again, we have to be careful and make sure that tip doesn't get too bulky. And there you go. There's your safety tip. I will take some sandpaper and scuff up the strapping tape at the end there for better adhesion. And now I'm getting basically an applicator for the DAP. Take a piece of blue foam and cut a little angle in it. And here I am kind of like testing out the fit of the core foam. Fold it over, see how it fits. And then we'll take like a marker and mark like the halfway point. Just for, a visual indicator for when you go to put the core in. All right. So now we're going to be applying the DAP to the core. Sorry for not wearing gloves. Probably should be wearing gloves. Definitely recommend it. Recommended to be outside and wearing a respirator. But I put the DAP on, pretty liberally. Make sure it's coating pretty well. Smooth it out a lot. But you don't want it all, goopy and drippy. But you also don't want any gaps in where you're applying it. So mainly put a bunch on, a decent amount you can see, and then spread it out so it's evenly covered. And just, again, take your time and make sure it's good to go. It takes a while to dry, so no worries about it drying too fast. Make sure the tip is well coated where the strapping tape is. Again, to me, it's not a weak point, but it's a point where sometimes the foam will separate, during the build process. So again, check the tip. I put this piece of wood down just because, the handle is, keeps me from laying the weapon flat. Also, this just makes it nicer for grabbing onto the foam. Again, so this is your 4-pound, routed core foam. I usually start by laying down some DAP, in the channel itself, and then covering, the sides, the parts that are going to meet, the unrouted part of that's going to touch and seal. Do be careful not to let it drip on the parts that will not be, glued together. You want to be fairly, liberal with the DAP, but you also don't want it, going everywhere. Again, it's just better to take your time, be as neat as possible, but thorough as well. I will typically do 2 coats. I don't know. It seems to work better. I've never had issues with things coming apart. But, I'll go from one end of the foam to the other and then start back again with the first bit. Here I'm kind of scraping it to remove any extra goop, just to make sure it's all spread pretty well. So now we're going to let the DAP dry 15 to 20 minutes. It should be sticky but not wet. But now, so it's dry, but now we're going to get some more DAP and put it just in the channel and just on the bottom part of the routed bit. And while that is still wet, then you're going to take the core and drop it down into the routed bit. It's got to be wet so that the core will properly, drop into the beveled part, or sorry, the routed part. Otherwise, the DAP is so sticky, it'll stick to the sides. You'll never get it to sit right. So again, here's another angle of, dropping it in. I've got the mark I made from before to know where to put the tip, and then just drop it into the channel, and then take your time and press it in, make sure it's good. We want to, it's also probably a good time to compare the angle or the orientation of the foam to your handle. Make sure you're doing that properly, especially if you have an oblong handle. You're going to make sure you want the foam facing the right way for striking. Here I'm just kind of cleaning up around a bit of the DAP that squeezed out when I was pressing down. Now we're going to let it dry again. Again, 15-20 minutes. Should be tacky but not like wet and sticky. Now here's an important technique. We're going to basically fold that foam back on itself so that the top part of the routed bit opens up. And I got a different angle here so you can see a little bit closer, but you kind of bend the foam back on itself so that opens up and it goes right over the tip. And take your time right there, because and that's where it's important that we were careful not to get the biscuit and the leather and the tape too big right there at the tip. And then you just keep using that same technique. You roll it as you're folding it back on itself to open up the routed channel, and then press along the way. Just take your time. You got plenty of time. It's it's already dry. You just got to be careful to get it on there just right. And doing this way also prevents it from sticking prematurely in the wrong area. Having to pull it back. You don't want to do that. So this technique, at least for me, works pretty well. And you'll just keep slowly going down the core, pressing as you go, and making sure that it is on there. You want it as straight as possible, as flat as possible. Both sides adhered as much as possible, because it's one of these projects where each layer kind of is built on the previous layer, and any mistakes are kind of exaggerated. They build on top of each other, so you want to be as straight and as precise as possible all the way through. So yep, here we are, just finishing it up right at where the core meets the handle. And usually you have a little bit left over because the foam actually stretches a wee bit as you're pressing it down. But anyway, just go back through and make sure both sides are met. Sometimes at this stage I will put like a metal ruler across the whole thing and weight it down and let it sit for a few hours or even overnight. Next, we're going to work on the striking foam. So this is our the 2-pound Fodere. Again, we got gloves on this time, outside respirator, putting the DAP on liberally on the the flat part there, and don't let it drip on the sides. Just try to be neat as possible, with being as generous with the DAP as possible. Again, this foam is a bit porous, so I will do 2 layers of the DAP. Once it gets to the end, I will start again and do 2 different coats of the DAP. That might be overkill, but it's a technique that's worked for me. So yeah, you just start at one end and work your way down. And you can see the blue camp foam slice that I've used for applying the DAP. It works fine. I'm not sure if I could properly use a brush now. I've used the foam so much. All right, so that's done. Here's our weapon with the first layer of the core foam on there. And then, we're going to dap that bit. Again, start at one end, take your time, be careful to get it nice and coated on the flat there, and without letting it drip on the ends. And again, you can see it absorbing. You can see the lighter parts where it's already absorbed the dap. So I will also do 2 coats here. But again, you just take a little bit of dap, put it on the weapon or put it on the foam, and then just slowly kind of smear it over. And for me, it's hard to tell, like, once it starts to dry, like, okay, is that a part that's dried, or is it a part that I missed? And again, that's probably another reason that I like to do 2 layers, because then I know I'm definitely getting it. Yeah, the light glare on here actually works, so I can kind of make that point. But you can see how there's some areas that are already drying and some that may or may not have dap. So double layers, make sure. Yeah, once you're at the tip, I always pay extra attention, just make sure I'm getting that covered well. The foam has like can take like a weird shape, so make sure you're covering all the areas well. And I think this is me starting the second layer. But you can sort of see by the glare how it works nice to have the second layer. And once we're done, it's going to be the same deal. We'll let the dap dry for 15 or 20 minutes. And that's all dependent on your conditions. If you're in a colder, wetter environment, time of year, it could take longer. Main thing is the dap, when you touch it, it should not be wet. It should not come away, from whatever you're using to touch it. It should be sticky, but not wet. And then I'd place the handle in a vise so it's straight up, and then I'll drop the striking foam, right on top. And then, you slowly work your way down. So you've got the foam bent in half. You take, the middle, put it at the tip of the weapon, and just slowly work your way down. For me, to make sure it is straight and adhered on both sides, this is the way technique that works for me. So that's what I do. And just press it in to make sure it's good to go here. Sometimes after this step, you'll need to trim a bit off, but sometimes after this step again, I will, I'll put some weight on the weapon and let it dry. Not so important with the blue weapons as it is with the reds. The reds sometimes, require more time to me. So here we are, we're testing out our stabby bit. I'll kind of do like a test to figure out where we need to apply the dap. Take your Sharpie, mark the area, and then, apply the dap, from that mark on one side of the mark on the other side. Same thing, careful not to drip it on the flat of the blade. Make sure you're getting plenty of dap on there. Please wear gloves. I'm not wearing gloves. I'll show you wearing gloves. Again, I'll probably do 2 layers here, 2 coatings, just to make sure, because again, that foam's pretty porous, and you definitely don't want your stabby tip to come off. Now we're going to do the Insulite. I typically do the rough side. And again, I'll do 2 layers of DAP. Again, let it dry 15-20 minutes. Tacky but not wet. Then we'll take our Insulite foam, judge right in the middle. Make sure it's even on both sides of the foam. And then just, press it down. Once that DAP is dry, that stuff is not going to move. All right, and here's a top-down view. I'll take that fine-tooth saw and just get it even with the striking edge and just kind of, go straight down. And that's how I trim the stabby bits, trim the stabby foam. It's because you're getting the saw in line with the blade of the weapon itself and just cut straight down. Now we're doing the duct tape on the flats. I usually take this up to just where the striking foam overlaps, or where the striking foam and the stabby foam meet. So just past the striking foam. I'll do the other side here. Alright, make sure that's nice and smooth. Now we're going to work on taping down the stabby tip. We're going to be using this. We're using strapping tape. So make a strip. It should come up. Like start from 5 or 6 inches down one side, over top of the tip, and then back down the other side. You can always trim it if you like. I usually start with the middle bit, the middle piece. Trying to get a good angle here. So yeah, I will put it, right middle of the strap of piece of tape, lap, over the stabby tip, and then while compressing a little bit, trying to get it right in the middle there. Then we're going to compress a little bit with the strapping tape and then tape it down. And we'll flip it over and do the same thing. Straight down. And now we're going to get another piece of strapping tape about the same length, and then tear that in half once I trim this part. The important part about the second 2 pieces is to make sure that the tape is only on the tip of the foam and not on the sides where it would be like your striking foam. So basically it's where the saw cut. So there's a line right there, and you want the edge of the tape to be on that line, not over the line. Otherwise it will cause the tip to tear, when you're doing normal strikes. So again, we're going to compress it down as we're taping it, and then come at an angle across to the other side. And you're not compressing the tip a whole lot, but you're definitely compressing it. And then we're going to do the other side in pretty much exactly the same way. Again, lining the edge of the tape up with the cutting edge, so it's just on the stabbing part and not on the striking edge of the weapon. Compressing a little bit that stabbing tip foam and come across at an angle again and slicing. The excess, slice the excess off. Another good time to have a nice sharp razor. And that's your stabby tip. Now we're doing the strapping tape on the striking edge of the foam. The important part here is, laying down the strapping tape, but also introducing some wrinkles so that there's a bit of room for the tape to basically stretch when the foam underneath of it is compressed when hitting. Again, otherwise, if there's not enough give there, not enough wrinkles in the strapping tape, it will pop the tape and consequently pop the foam underneath as well. I'm just kind of pushing down on the foam and putting in a little bit a lot of slack in the tape as I press it down. You want to do that all the way to the tip. Just keep working your way up using the same technique. Come across the top, one continuous piece of strapping tape, and back down the other side using the same technique all the way. Then you just want to get the razor blade and cut off the overlap of strapping tape that's there, cutting away from yourself, of course, all the way up and around. And the strapping tape is pretty easy to cut, with those fibers. And a nice sharp razor blade, it cuts really easy. But pay particular attention right here at the tip. Make sure you don't cut too much off or too little. And that, my friends, is pretty much your weapon rebladed. At this point, you can't use it right away. Recommend at least 24 hours of curing time before using it. Longer is always better. So don't wait like the day before practice or a fight to reblade your weapon. I would do it, a couple days out. But there you have it. It's ready to go, ready to put the cover back on and hit some more nerds. Thank you very much.